I am recording. Okay, perfect. So hello everyone. So let's continue with this. Hello. So let's continue with this classification of images. And so far, what have we seen? We have seen three types of images. The first one was image perception, when you are concerned with describing something. I've said the way you describe something, really the way, with the means you give to yourself to describe something, will express your degree of awareness when it comes to that thing. And you said that when it comes to degrees of awareness, the lowest degree would be when you just have an opinion on something. This is when you just express how you think is the thing without any further concern as to its objectivity, constitution, or anything else. And the highest degree is practically when you become the thing and when you're able to express how the thing is, to describe how the thing is by becoming the thing. Okay, so this is for perception, and I insist on saying that you always have these two axes. You have a vertical axe where you really need to be aware of, which is the axe of what is at stake. You say, yeah, he's doing a description. Yes, he's doing a description, and he's showing us the part, yes, but what is at stake? Is he showing us an awareness of a kind of socialist awareness and kind of communist awareness? Is he showing us a kind of shamanic awareness? How is he understanding his object? And depending on your degree of awareness, your degree of consciousness, you're able to perceive. Huxley wrote a book called The Doors of Perception, and I think this is what it means. It means that you perceive when you open your consciousness up, and the less your consciousness is open, the less you perceive. Now, so that was the first type. You can work and live in that and produce things into that. The second type that you have seen is affection. Now, you've said that in affection, you don't describe. What you do is that you are going to express. Now, what's the difference between these two? Usually, we express what is only potentially here, what is not really here, or in quote, what is not actually here. And this is when you go into expression. See, expression is never about something which is actually present. This is why I said that the object of expression, which is the most common, is God. God can only be expressed, but God cannot be described. This is why you have all of these mystics, be it from Saint Teresa to Hallaj to Plotinus, who can only express how God touched them instead of describing him or making a map of God. So this is when it comes to affection. So affection is really dealing with these entities which are potentially here, and you said that you can express whatever you want. You can express all kinds of things, but the main point is that the expression deals with the how can I put it? In a way, with the essence of things. When you say the blue, well, the blue as such, if you want to express blueness, well, it's neither anymore the blues that you hear in music, nor the blues that you see, but it's something common, but which is intangible. And this is when you reach a pure expression of blueness, which is neither this nor that blue. So when it comes to affection, as you can see, when it comes to affection, you are really dealing with the intangible, the inexpressible, and actually only the inexpressible, of course, is expressible, meaning things like God, things like like that are the what we can express. Now, and we said that on the vertical axis, what is at stake is how much can you feel, and you become this kind of universal empathic feeling. You become God when you feel, when you touch God, and there's no more difference between you and God, like Rumi, Ibn Arabi, and Plotinus say. And the lowest degree is when you take your own sentiments, your own little feelings, to be dictates on the world, which is the opposite of the mystic God. And in between, you have a middle degree, which is passion, where you feel like your lover and your lover feels like you, or you feel your lover and your lover feels you, and you indistinguish you and your lover. And this is what you call passion, which is a kind of middle degree. And depending on where you are of this kind of scale, you will express things in a certain way. And this will reveal your degree of empathy, or how much sensitive you are to things and to the world. The third image that we have seen is the impulse image. And in the impulse image, we've said that we are dealing with the tradition. So what's the problem of tradition? This is the vertical axis. The problem with tradition is that very quickly it can become a kind of oppressive thing that closes on you. So there's a degree of closure of the tradition. And when you try to connect back to some origin, either you want to break a tradition, or you want to refresh the tradition, or you want to rejuvenate the tradition. So you are dealing with this kind of problems, like what they say, we need to go back to the originary of the golden age of Islam. What they're trying to say is we need to refresh our tradition because it's getting too stiff. When someone says, like, when someone like Buñuel shows you Jesus as he was in his origin, it's because he contrasts him with what they did with Jesus, meaning with what the church did with Jesus. It turned him into this kind of fixed, very rigid dogma. And to go back to Jesus would be a way to refresh the Christic spirit. And these are the problems you deal with when you are in the impulse. So the impulse, if you take the surrealist revolution, now of course it's related to the revolution, because the revolution in politics is what rejuvenates and what refreshes a tradition which is getting too stiff and too old, as you have seen in all the revolutions, like the French Revolution, as far as the surrealists are concerned, via Hegel, meaning when you go back to the state of the origin, this is when you're able to rejuvenate society. And the surrealists conceive this mechanism where you need to keep the origin away while all the time referring to it to have a kind of constant revolution or a constant state of rejuvenation. So this is what we did so far. So today we are moving into the next type. You see, it's not complicated. So far we've seen perception, affection, impulse, and you said that impulse is between the affect and the action. And this is why it's a very difficult image to maintain, because either it goes towards the affect or it goes towards the action kind of image. And very few authors, you have only Stroheim, Buñuel, the surrealists, the Dadaists, and the Dadaists, you have seen that they had a lot of problem maintaining that. Very few authors are able to remain and to hold and to remain in this kind of middle ground. Now we move into action. You see, action, if it is neither, the essence of things like blueness. When we deal with affects, you really deal with, the things as they are, like le bleu, the blue, God, things like that as they are in themselves, and which are inactual. Now, when you deal with impulses, the taste of the blood is a kind of thing that comes from the origins, and you go and you tear it away. So blood would be, or red would be, this kind of symptoms or indicator for the impulse to erupt. Now, on the other hand, On the other hand, when it comes to action, well, action is very simple. Action is really the world as we know it. The by default word, when you wake up and you drink your coffee and you go to work, well, this is the world of action. What does it mean? It means that in the world of action, you have very well-defined qualities, very well-defined powers, very well-defined subjects, objects, and all of these together, they form a milieu. What is a milieu? A milieu is simply the collection of the powers and qualities in which the subjects and objects are taken. Very simple. If you take Anouk, Anouk is a movie about Eskimos. So if you take Anouk, Anouk by Flaherty. So Anouk by Flaherty is the story of an Eskimo, and what is the movie about? The movie is about, of course, confronting the milieu, which is the milieu, which is the North Pole. And in the North Pole, what are the qualities? Well, you have cold, you have white, the white of the snow. You have powers like the wind. You have powers like a bear or a fish. Or you have all kinds of powers and creatures. All kinds of subjects and objects, and you have to live in that. Milieu and confront. So Flaherty hands show you this kind of milieu, and you, as a subject, your goal is to confront the milieu. I'll just play it here in the background so you can see it. And you really need to be able to feel these things. When you move from an impulse image into a kind of action image, you need to develop a kind of feeling in relation to that. So I'm going to share my screen. Where is that? It's here. Okay. So this is and you see that Flaherty begins by presenting the milieu. Mysterious barren land, desolated, you have wind, etc. And then he shows you the milieu. These images are images of exposing the milieu. He tells you what are the constraints of the milieu, the sterility of the soil, the rigor of the climate, etc. These are powers which are present in the milieu. And he's going to show you, as it says, this struggle between Anouk and this very harsh place. You see, now he presents you the subject in this milieu with his family, and he shows you the different actions that is going to allow him to confront this milieu. I hope this is clear. So what I'm trying to say here is this. Trying to say is that when you're dealing with an action image, you know, the classical Hollywood movie is what? The first, you have the camera presenting the milieu, like you have a shot of New York, this is the milieu, and then you have what you call parallel montage. Now, what is a parallel montage? It's simply a montage where you put an image after an image for you to understand the different components of the milieu. I can show you the snow, the ice, a bear, the family, and this is how you understand what is present there. If you go back to our example on New York, like a romantic comedy in New York, what will you have? Well, you will have New York, and then you see a guy in his home. He's trying to make coffee, and there's no coffee. Then you see a woman taking out her dog for a walk. Then you have a shot of the guy who sells coffees and fruits. And what you call the face montage where you present things. Now, the thing is that this montage is going to converge. You're going to have a point of convergence and lines of convergence. When you see that the guy is missing coffee, he doesn't have coffee, and the woman is going to take the dog out, you know that, maybe these two, which are neighbors, are going to meet in the street or in the grocery shop. And indeed, this is what happened. And this is how the parallel montage is going to turn into a convergent montage. So after showing you the characters, you show something going on, and this thing is prepared in time. So this is what you call a convergent montage until you reach a point which is the point of the incident or the event, which is meaningful in this milieu, like a love story. And this is when you have a moment, which is usually a moment of duel, because you have to react to the other subject in accordance with the laws of the milieu. The guy has to be charming, the woman too, etc. So they have to do their seduction duel. And from there, it goes into another place. So, of course, in romantic comedies, many times you have a kind of rough duel in the beginning. They hate each other and they want to kill each other. And this creates a new crisis, new kind of situation, and the new situation will contract again into a new duel, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, the milieu or the action image has a rhythm, or what Deleuze calls a breathing rhythm. You start with a kind of amplified milieu, and then you have these lines of convergence that start to emerge inside your milieu. You have your duel, which is a point of crisis, and after that you have a new situation, and after the new situation, a new duel, situation duel, situation duel. This is, if you want, the formula of the great form of the great form of cinema, or what you call ASA, which means action, situation, action. So what's the difference between a milieu and a situation? The difference between a milieu and a situation is that all the situations are made possible by the milieu. So inside the same milieu, which is New York, or this neighborhood of New York, you can have all kinds of situations, which is a moment or where you will have a confrontation between subjects inside the milieu, or you have a kind of a problem between the subjects, or the subjects and the objects between the milieu. So this is, if you want, the rhythm. So if you go back to that and you think about it, you go back to that, how a kind of classical movie is constructed, just for you to understand the world of action, which is our world, actually. What you do is first you begin by absorbing your milieu. You start, you learn the language, you learn the customs, you learn your neighborhood, you learn about your family, etc., etc. This is when you absorb the milieu. And when you have absorbed the milieu, well, after this absorption, you are ready to go into a situation where you are going to confront the problems of this milieu. For example, I hope you'll watch this movie, which is a perfect, classical, great movie, which is The Young Mr. Lincoln. And in The Young Mr. Lincoln, we see the young Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, the guy who is going to become the president. And you see the young Mr. Lincoln, and you see him learning, really learning about everything which is related to his milieu, meaning you see him reading books. This is the moment of absorption. You see him talking to people, you see him walking in the streets, observing, etc., etc. And really he is taking in all that. And he takes in all that to the point where he becomes the milieu. So when a man or a woman becomes the milieu, they have integrated all the elements, components of the milieu, and they really know how it works perfectly well now. They become, in a way, those who carry this milieu, or who can carry this milieu further. For example, Abraham Lincoln, after he had learned all the customs and more than the customs, really how people live and talk and inhabit this space in which he is, after he had learned all of that, he becomes a lawyer. And for him, the United States is a milieu that should go towards a situation which is the state of justice rather than the state of chaos and of the rule of the mob, like it used to be during the Western heydays. So it needs to go there because there are forces in this milieu which are democratic, rational, etc., which needs to go there. So in this movie, after the first phase where you see Abraham Lincoln really like absorbing his milieu, what happens is that he is now a young lawyer, and there is a kind of feast in the village, and you have the local people having their carnival, and you have visitors, foreigners, and a murder is committed. So the people of the village immediately they accuse the foreigners in a kind of chauvinistic, a bit racist way. And this is when the duel happens between Abraham Lincoln and the mob. So I hope now you see how it goes. First, you have the moment of absorption, presentation and absorption of the milieu. Second, what Ford puts in place is the convergence towards this duel between Abraham Lincoln and the mob. And how is the conversion made? By showing you that there's a feast being prepared in the village. Some foreigners are coming, but among the villagers, you have still very violent and very brutal kind of characters. And you can feel that it's going to happen. And indeed, it happens. One of these brutal guys kills someone, but the village accuses the foreigner. And this is when you have the duel between Abraham Lincoln and the mob. So I will show you that, the duel between Abraham Lincoln and the mob. And I hope you see that here, you have a duel which is a verbal duel. So this is the mob who wants to kill the foreigners, and Abraham Lincoln is confronting them.
Now, gentlemen, I'm not up here to make any speeches. All I got to say is I can lick any man here, hands down. Come on, man! Come on! I gotta let that man stand their way! Hold on, Beck. I thought I'd find that big mouth of yours around here telling people what to do.
I'm Big Buck, all right. I'm the biggest buck in this lick.
Well, come on up and whet your horns. What's the horns?
Get away, Lincoln. We're coming too.
All joking aside, let's look at this matter from my side. Well, you all know I'm just a fresh lawyer trying to get ahead. But some of you boys act like you want to do me out of my first clients. I'm not saying you fellas are not right. Maybe these boys do deserve to hang. But with me handling their case, don't look like you'll have much to worry about on that score. All I'm asking is to have it done with some legal pomp and show.
That's all right. Absolutely right. Up on our side of it. We've gone to a heap of trouble not to have at least one hanging.
Sure you have, Mac. And if these boys had more than one life, I'd say go ahead. Maybe a little hanging mightn't do them any harm. But the sort of hanging you boys would give them would be so permanent. Trouble is, when men start taking the law into their own hands, just as apt to know the confusion and fun to start hanging somebody who's not a murderer as somebody who is. And the next thing you know, they're hanging one another just for fun. Till it gets to a place a man can't pass a tree or look at a rope without feeling uneasy. We seem to lose our heads in times like this. We do things together that we'd be mighty ashamed to do by ourselves. For instance, you take Jeremiah Carter yonder. There's not a finer, more decent, God-fearing man in Springfield than Jeremiah Carter. And I wouldn't be surprised if when he goes home, he takes down a certain book and looks into it. Maybe you just happen to hit on these words. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Why don't you put it down for a spell, boys? Ain't it getting heavy? That's all I've got to say, friends. Good night.
Okay, I hope you got the image. You see, Abraham Lincoln, which is a hero. What is a hero in a kind of action movie? It's someone who has integrated, who has impregnated himself so well of his milieu that that he's able to react at any point to any situation in that milieu. He really knows how to speak to the to anyone in his community. And I think really you see that in the movie The Young Mr. Lincoln, where instead of shooting, Abraham Lincoln speaks, and he speaks faster than his shadow, meaning he has a reply to any situation, and he's able to turn the mind of the one with whom he's speaking in a way to reorient him to the building of a nation grounded on justice and not to a nation grounded on the rule of the mob, as it was at that time, meaning at the moment of the birth of the United States. So I hope you see how this kind of duel happens. And this really, you see it in a lot of places, this moment of absorption, becoming the forces of the milieu, and then you use these forces that you have absorbed in order to confront any situation in the milieu. If you take Rocky, which is Sylvester Stallone, he goes to the mountain and he absorbs the forces while he's training, and then when he has absorbed these forces which are in his mountain, and the mountain is part of the milieu, he comes back and he confronts let's say, the Russian evil boxer, and he's able to beat him because he was able to integrate these kind of forces of the milieu. And the more you integrate them, the more you become reactive. If you want, the cliche scenes is Spider-Man. Now, Spider-Man is a kind of artificial integration because he was bitten by a spider, but it doesn't matter. What happens is that with Spider-Man, you see Spider-Man jumping around, and he's able to move and catch and react to any kind of situation, in this case an active situation. You have the whole building exploding, and you have Spider-Man jumping around, and he's able to, to react, action-reaction to everything, and to save his beloved or the innocent child or stuff like that before they get hit by a debris coming from the explosion. So this is, if you want, the basic trope of the image action. You have a milieu, a subject can impregnate himself from the milieu, and then you have this breathing movement, which is that you have a moment of impregnation, explosion, impregnation, explosion, which makes the rhythm of the action movies. For example, if you take Kazan, which is a great action movie maker, a classic, Elia Kazan in America, he shows you, actually the movie itself is structured in a way where you see this rhythm, the moment of impregnation and then explosion, impregnation, explosion. For example, America becomes with a moment where the man is dreaming of leaving. He wants to go to change his milieu. He wants to leave to the States. And you see him first duel with his grandmother to get from her some money, and he's able to get some money. Then new situation, he needs to travel now, so on and so forth. So at one point, you have this guy, this young man who was able to get some money from his parents to go to America. At one point, a thief steals his money on his way somewhere in, let's suppose he was in the village and he stole his money in Istanbul. And here you see the scene where the thief is mocking this guy, and you have this moment of impregnation. You see that the guy is impregnating. He's taking in, this time not the elements of the milieu, but the attacks of the thieves. At one point, he explodes. And when he explodes, you have the moment of explosion. Now, these two polarities where you take in, if you want in Rocky, you see the Russian guy boxing Rocky. This is the vegetative part where you just take in, and take in. And then at one point you explode, meaning you react because you are fed up, you had enough of this, in this case, absorption of your opponent. Yes. Does anyone has a question? Hello? Anna? Who is speaking? No? Any? So I continue. So I'm going to show you the scene from America, which is a scene of impregnation. So it's a scene of impregnation. 1 second, I'll show it to you. Yeah, so here, this is the scene where the guy is going to be
that you had swallowed. No? I saw you do so in court. At the time, I thought to myself, let him have something, poor thing. But the situation has changed. You see, I cannot be so generous. I'll admit that you've been patient. If I'd been you, I'd have long since taken out that blade you hold there and put it to its proper use. But we Turks are primitive, while you Greeks are civilized. I envy you. You've learned how to bear misfortune, swallow insult and indignity, and still smile. I truly envy you.
This is a moment of the vegetative pole where you see that he is absorbing.
Anything? Anything moving? Nothing yet, huh?
And the Turkish guy is provoking him to use his knife.
How long do you suppose? Only Allah knows that, huh? One clean cut almost anywhere, and the life flows out. A twitch or two, and it's over. A drink? No, of course you don't drink. You don't fight. You have no use for women. What
This
kind
is
of a man
still
are
the
you?
absorption side.
No? Any different from sheep, but...
great is thy name. Great is thy greatness. There is no deity but thee. I seek refuge near you, Allah. In the name of Allah, the Passionate.
I hope you got this kind of polarity. This is what we call the vegetative and the animal polarity, which is the vegetative, you absorb, and then at one point you explode, you attack, you counterattack. And if you watch movies by Kazan or even a very beautiful movie by Fuller, White Dog really, you feel this kind of moments where the dog absorbs and then attacks. And it's always this kind of rhythm of absorptions and explosions. So this is for the general scheme of an action environment. We said then you have the milieu, situation where a problem starts to emerge, convergence towards a dual, and then when you have a dual, well, you have a new situation, and so on and so forth. But what is really at stake in the action? What is at stake in the action, or what makes an action movie nice, as we say, or an action installation nice, is its relation to the accident. So you have actions and accidents, meaning an action or the problem of the actions inside situations / milieu is that your plan, let's say the plan of the Greek guy to travel to America, his plan never goes as planned. And this is what makes the beauty of an action movie. The beauty of an action movie is that I plan to travel, but while going there, they steal my money, I have to murder, because I murdered, now I have to prostitute myself, etc., etc. This is the plot of America. And you see how you have accidents which makes you deviate from your planified action. So this is why in very early movies, the canonical movie by the canonical action movie was the hold up of a bank. And here you see how you have a plan. You see a first phase where we planify the hold up, and then you have a phase where we're going to execute the plan. And of course, everything is taken to the minute. So if you watch Dr. Mabuza part 1, you see that you have a clock, and Dr. Mabuza is able to chronometer each single actions, and by that he's able to win over all the contingencies of the milieu, and this is how he's able to achieve his goal, because he's a mastermind and a master planner. While in other movies, sometimes it doesn't work. In later movies, you see that something happens and your hold-up doesn't work, and things go astray. Things go in another direction. So I hope you get this kind of thing. You have a planification, where the plan will have a kind of minutation of action in order to dominate any accidents, or you can use the accident to generate a new line of action reaction or of action situation in order to do that. So some artists deal with this kind of thing, and you see that for them the accident as such could be or could become a kind of principle for creating things. And I will show you here, for example, the Goldberg machines. This is a Goldberg machine. And this machine, as it says, it is a machine to, it's a simple idea to keep you from forgetting to mail your wife's letter by Goldberg. Okay, so how does it work? As you can see, it's a very complex machine. So Professor Butts gets caught in a revolving door and becomes dizzy enough to dope out an idea to keep you from forgetting to mail your wife's letter. This is how you get the idea. As you walk past cobbler shop hook A, so you're walking past the cobbler, the hook A strikes the suspended boot B causing it to kick football C through goal posts D. Football drops into basket E, and string F tilts a sprinkling can G, causing water to soak coat tails H here. As coat shrinks, cord I opens door G of the cage, allowing bird K to walk out on perched L and grab worm M, which is attached to string N. This pulls down window shade O, on which it's written, well, you sap mail that letter. A simple way to avoid all this trouble is to marry a wife who can't write. Okay, so I hope you're getting this kind of Goldberian machines, which are very absurd. Some people call them, unfortunately, surrealist machines, but they're not really surreal. They're really, there's no originary problem here or anything. They're really a way to make the accident generate a machine, makes the accident generate a machine. This is another relation of accident and machine. This is the cyclograveur by Tengeli. Tengeli is to make these absurd machines where the mechanism is at the service of creating, well, accidental effects, like, like these random drawings. You sit here on the bike and you pedal, and when you pedal, this thing starts to turn, and you have a canvas at the end of that, which is another way to create this kind of machines, which are generating accidental effects. You have Munari too, which is quite known for these absurd machines, and this is like the Goldberg machine, but how to boil your egg in the morning. You will need a snail that will eat a leaf, and after eating the leaf, something will drop, hitting the lamp bowl, etc., and then the egg falls in the hot water, and this is how you boil your egg. So as you can see here, the machinic is formatted, or is really like constructed by the chain of the accidents. Instead of having a kind of minutage or a machine that's going to contain all possible accidents, like in Dr. Mabuza, what you have here is the other scheme. What you have here is actually machines which are themselves made by accidents. So this is in Dr. Mabuza. And here you see the minutage. So he wants to steal a contract, he wants to steal a contract. The minutage. And the action begins. Okay, I hope you get the idea, and it goes on like that. This is how he's able to steal the documents, etc., by coordinating all the different actions, this kind of machine he's building, thanks to the minutage of the action. So this, if you want, what is at stake in the action image is there's always a problem of the accidental, and how the accidents can still emerge, or how the accident will emerge inside a milieu, which is one of the main problems in an organized world, an actually organized world, is how can we still have a space for events to occur, accidents, for things which are unexpected to occur, And one of the way for the action image to deal with that is by introducing by confronting these accidents in the unfolding of the action. So this is, if you want, for the what you call the large form. The large form is when you have a milieu. You present the milieu, be it the North Pole or New York or wherever you want, lines of conversion and doers. Now you have another form, which is what you call the small form. Now, what is the small form? The small form is a bit the reverse of the large form. The large form, first you see the milieu and you understand the situation, and then you get into the action. While in the small form, what you have is actions which are indices of a possible situation, which is very different. For example, I give you an example taken from Eisenstein. Eisenstein, in a kind of encounter with Pudovkin, used to ask Pudovkin, "You, Pudovkin, if you want to film a war, like the Russian army against, let's say, the German army, how would you film that?" And Pudovkin used to tell Eisenstein, "I would begin with a shot on the boots of the officer. I would begin by showing, for example, that the boots of the officer are very clean and shiny. This way, from this shot, which is now an indice, we will understand that the Russian army is quite disciplined, and the officer in this army are very, very well clean on themselves, and they respect the laws." And this is able to give an image of the Russian. So to that, Eisenstein replies, "It doesn't, well, no, you shouldn't do it like that. What you should do is that you should begin with a big shot, a large shot, a distant shot on the Russian troops walking down a valley." You see, this would be treating the situation, milieu, as a great form or a large form, where you show the milieu before going into the details and the actions. While if you go through the small form, you begin with the details, and actually it's the details that will tell you what is going on. And this is how Pudovkin makes his movies. And of course, when you have this kind of movie makers, they will not understand each other because, formally speaking, they disagree. For Eisenstein, it's obvious that you should begin with this kind of panoramic on the Russian army, while for Pudovkin, no, you have to begin with the detail, because the detail will tell you what is going on. And this is how, in this movie by Pudovkin, at one point, we see the boots, another shot, we see the boots of the officer which are dirty. And we understand, as Deleuze says, that the officer was degraded, and now he's not anymore paying attention to his cleanness. And this is a sign of the collapse and the defeat of the Russian army. So you see how you work now. You have an image, and the image is going to indicate towards a situation. And when you have this kind of thing going on in a movie, this is what we call an ellipse. Now, what is an ellipse? An ellipse, as Deleuze says, have two definitions. The first definition of the ellipse is something missing, is what you call a gap or something missing. For example, you can have an ellipse of time. One of these movies with an ellipse of time, you see a woman which is poor, and then in the next shot, you see her very richly dressed, and you understand that she became rich. So you had a situation in which she was poor, and then instead of showing you all the action of her becoming rich, you just see another image just after this one, where she is richly dressed, and you understand that she became rich, and this is what you call an ellipse. You have a kind of jump in time, but you understand what happened between situation 1 and situation 2. There's a whole art of the ellipse, which means what indices I'm going to show in order to compress as much time as I can This is, if you want, an art of the ellipse in the meaning of something missing, in the meaning of a gap. I can fill in the gap, me, because I understand that if I see this, then that. Let's say you have a love story. You can see one image they're eating at a restaurant, another image they are, let's say, carrying a baby, and then one image she's throwing her ring on him. And you understand that they went from dating to marriage to divorce. This is what you call ellipses. And if you want, the master of the ellipse in this sense is Lubitsch, which makes beautiful movies with ellipses like that, where you start seeing the movie unfold with very, very few details, where you fill in the gap. So this is, if you want, the first definition of the ellipse. The ellipse consists then in showing an indice, an indice. And then that's going to point towards the situation. This is the exact definition of an indice, or else, well, or else it's not an indice anymore. So the indice is going to point towards a situation, and you understand the situation from the indice. An example in Lubitsch, which is very nice. At one point, a husband comes back home from travel, and he sees his best friend at 8 o'clock in the morning dressed in a smoking. And he understands, just by seeing him dressed in a smoking, that actually he had spent the night here because when they knew that he was coming, he dressed, and all what he had to put on is his smoking. And he understood by that he had an affair with his wife. And this is an indice, okay? And in Lubitsch, you have like really all kinds of indices of this kind. But the interesting treatment of that is the double-centered ellipse, because as you know, ellipse is a shape, the shape ellipse, this kind of oval. It has two focal points, and hence you have the possibilities to understand the ellipse as pointing to two situations. So I can give you an indice, and it can point to two situations. I don't know if you have seen, you have on Facebook and stuff like that, some humoristic montages where you see where they show you a couple of indices like a rope and a woman crying, and think that the situation is that they are going to hang the man, and then they show you the situation and you see that actually they're not hanging the man, they're just pulling a cow out of a barn, and you laugh because you thought that they were going to hang the man. Well, actually, it was just a kind of work of peasantry. So Charlie Chaplin, is one of these movie makers who is going to really like inhabit this dimension of the double-centered indice. Because if you watch a movie by Charlie Chaplin, you always have an image, and the image points towards two situations. For example, if you take the modern times, while he's working in the factory, you don't know anymore if you are in a factory or in a mental hospital, because it seems that Charlie Chaplin develops a kind of neurosis where the thing is pointing towards mental hospital and factory. And the whole art of Charlie Chaplin is by showing you this image, you start seeing the factory as a mental hospital, and you start laughing at a situation which is very laughable, which is what's happening in the factory, but also crying because the other situation, that of being in a mental hospital, is a very sad situation. And what Charlie Chaplin does is that he covers these two situations, and hence you have this laughter, as Deleuze puts it, where it's very funny, but at the same time very sad. And this is what makes, if you want, the craft and the beauty of the Chaplin movies. So I will show you this kind of layering. This is the scene from the modern times.
Trouble on bench 5. Check on the nut tightness. Nut coming through loose on bench 5. Attention, foreman.
hope you saw the accident in relation to that.
Quickly feeds your men while at work. You cannot afford to ignore the importance of the billows feeding.
Got the idea. Now he becomes like a neurotic, and he's doing that all the time. But also you detected the elements, the machinic organizations, introduction of the accident, which is the fly, and how these things disturb the course of a pre-programmed action. So I'll show you another one, which is also from the modern times, which is the flag. So this is after his recovery from being mentally ill. This is the accident. And the new situation. Okay, so I hope you understand here how the flag functions. If you want, the two situations are private property capitalism, and the other one is insurrection and strike against in quote private property. And you see how when he was waving the flag, it's as if he's telling the guy who owns it, it's your flag, you have to take it back. And at the same time, it is, I am the guy leading the revolution. So he is in between, or this action, this image is an indice that points towards two opposite situations, which makes you know, the humor and the beauty of that shot. So so you see, Charlie Chaplin really relates to a political discourse. What is his political stance? And here again, I hope that you will see how politics can articulate to art in a non-illustrative way. You see, Chaplin's conception, if you read him or see his interview, is that he's a Democrat. He believes in democracy, and for him, democracy is a milieu where the small differences shouldn't lead to extravagant different situations. And this is why, as you can see, Chaplin walk in zigzag. He's always in between, hesitating between two situations, or the image itself hesitates or brings together two situations. And for him, democracy is that when you have a small difference, this small difference between people shouldn't lead them to end up in incredibly different situation. Let's suppose your friend is a bit smarter than you, or his parents are a bit richer than your parents. It's not normal for Charlie Chaplin that you end up in total misery and your friend ends up in having a lot of money, let's say. Or if you want, the other illustration of that is in The Dictator, where you see the Jew hairdresser, and the Jew hairdresser really looks like Hitler, the Nazi Hitler. And you see that this kind of small difference leads to a kind of, in the image at least here, as a caricature, you see that actually it's the same guy that could be both, or as a face. And what Chaplin criticizes is that you shouldn't let these small differences lead to a kind of extravagantly different situation. And he plays on bringing together these two situations. And usually Chaplin all the time hesitates between the situations until towards the end of the movie, where you have a straight line or a straight discourse, which brings the two situations as close as possible together in an encompassing situation where the differences would not lead anymore to great differences in situation. I hope this is clear. What I'm saying is very simple. If you look at the image of the end of modern times, you see Charlie Chaplin and his lover walking in a straight line. Or if you take the discourse of the dictator at the end of the movie, The Dictator, it's a discourse on humanity, and it shows you that humanity or humanism is the milieu in which differences will not lead to an extravagant opposition between situations. This is a nice way to really present the concept of democracy as a place where differences do not lead to extravagant differences in situation. Where you have a kind of egalitarianism, but that conserves a kind of set of differences. Now, if you look at another author, just to contrast, if you take Buster Keaton, first, Buster Keaton is not in the large form, but he's in the small form. Why? Because simply put, in Buster Keaton, you see the milieu. For example, Buster Keaton is confronted and he's standing on a bridge and the bridge is going to collapse. What Buster Keaton does, the first thing he does, is that he shows you the bridge. So you're not anymore into a logic of the indice. You're in a logic of the sin sign, meaning I show you the milieu, or what stands for the milieu. This is what you call a sin sign, the bridge. And then you see how Buster Keaton is going to navigate inside this milieu. But what is the characteristic of Buster Keaton? The characteristic of Buster Keaton, as you know, he's known for the stone face. Buster Keaton is known, and actually it's one of his epithets, that he's the stone face. He's absolutely inexpressive, unreactive, and he doesn't absorb the milieu. You see, he's all the time with the same face. And this is an indicator towards anarchy. So what is anarchy? Anarchy is simply when you are in this milieu, you're indifferent to the milieu, and you just try to cut through the milieu the best way you can without trying to change it or anything. All what you care about is your own safety or your own interest. And it's an image here of a kind of an anarchic political position. And Buster Keaton is known for that. He's known for his, for example, trajectory gag. And in the trajectory gag, you see really Buster Keaton crossing a whole explosion of hazardous events, and he passes through it unscathed, untouched. And I will show you this now. This is one of the gag trajectory. And here he's followed by a woman because So he's followed by women because he put an ad in the newspapers that he wants to marry and he's very rich. I hope you got the idea. And this is really like an anarchic take where, as I said, you remain indifferent to the milieu and all what you need to do is cross. You see, so now if you take what we've said already, Abraham Lincoln, Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, Abraham Lincoln would stand for a kind of nationalism in politics where you really absorb the milieu. You become very American, you become super Lebanese or whatever is your milieu, you really like absorb it, and then you are the one through your actions who is able to take this milieu to a better place or to its best accomplishment, like Abraham Lincoln taking the United States towards a kind of accomplishment of a state of justice or a situation of justice. We've seen Charlie Chaplin with his democratism and how he shows you that there's always this kind of hesitation between two options or two situations. This is kind of freedom of choice kind of theories. And the best thing is to find a situation where we wouldn't have small differences that leads to great differences in situation. And the third one is Buster Keaton with his anarchism and his kind of indifferent presence in the milieu, and all that he needs to do is just get out of here the best way he can and save his skin. And Buster Keaton is going to use everything for his own kind of interest. You see that, for example, in the what Deleuze calls the the minority or the l'usage minoritaire, the minority use of the machines, where, for example, Buster Keaton is going to use the kitchen of a huge boat, really a huge boat, which is usually made to make food for thousands of people. And he's going to use this kitchen where you have a huge pots to cook an egg. You have this kind of very humoristic situation where he's trying to bring the egg inside the pot because it's very big and he needs to create pulleys and machines to do that. So here you have what you call a minoritarian use of the machine. Meaning you use the big machines of society, be it highways or the electric plant or I don't know, or an oil industry for your own personal use. If you want an anecdote, once I had a guy, installing my AC, and the electricity went out. So given that the guy knows the guy in Électricité du Liban, he called him to put the electricity just for him for 15 minutes to install the machine. Now, when you use Électricité du Liban just to turn on your little your lamp to do your little thing, this is an anarchic use. And I think Lebanon is very, very prone to anarchic images and anarchic humor, because as you know, sometimes they open a highway just because one of those in power has a house, has his mountain house somewhere, and they build the whole highway just to serve this his house. This is an anarchic use where you have the big machines at the service of the individual, which is indifferent really to his milieu as such. Now, and here, of course, if you want to go into this image, you can compare the different machines. For example, you have the absurd machines of Tinguely and Munari and Goldberg, which are in this kind of line. You have the minoritarian use of the machine of Buster Keaton. You have the machine in Charlie Chaplin, which is a kind of oppressive, dictatorial machine where you see that it doesn't give you time to breathe or time to receive accidents. This is how you can, if you want to work with machines, see where you are exactly, and what would be the political action and what is politically at stake by building these machines. And I hope you see here that it's not about illustration anymore. It really becomes a kind of creating presence for these kind of political view. So I hope that this is more or less clear. So we have seen so far the large form and the small forms. But sometimes you have people who wake up in the morning and instead of identifying to their milieu, well, they start identifying to something much, much bigger. What do I mean by that? If you are Abraham Lincoln, for you, what counts is the United States, the Arizona, and you want to make this place better. This is a classical kind of nationalistic take on action. And this is how you identify to your milieu. If you are Charlie Chaplin, it's the same. He's still part of this kind of democratic speech, and he's thinking that we can make these better by bringing down the differences between people. But you can wake up one morning and you consider that your milieu is not your society. It's not your immediate milieu. Like, let's suppose you're an Eskimo, your milieu is the snow and the North Pole, but you decide that your milieu is, let's say, the universe. This is when we say you have a kind of you are in a kind of delirious take on the milieu. You are really like now considering that you relate to the universe instead of relating to simply your environment. So if you take someone like Elon Musk, when you see this, when he has sent his car, it's a kind of also advertisement, but in space, and he wants to go conquer Mars. Of course, we wonder why you want to do that. So these kinds of what you call megalomaniac visions and hallucinatory actions, meaning you have a vision to go on Mars. To go on Mars, well, you have to build from the Earth a whole equipment that will take you to Mars, and you don't even know if you'll be able to sustain yourself on Mars, but you put all your money into that. And this is what you call a visionary type of action, where you measure yourself to a kind of extravagant milieu. You're not dealing anymore with your immediate milieu and with what this milieu is asking you to do. You are inventing a milieu and putting a burden on yourself to confront that. So you see, for example, today one of the critiques of addressed to Elon Musk is, why do you want to go to Mars? Why don't you use all this money and invest in renewable energy that will make the Earth livable, instead of building rockets and houses and machines to go to Mars? It's a lot of wasted money, as they say, but they don't understand that this guy is in a delirium. And when you have a delirium of action, it's simply when you measure yourself and you ask yourself to confront a milieu which is way, way beyond your reasonable power and beyond what your real milieu is asking you to do. So one of the artists who went in that line is, as you know, Christo. If you take Christo, you know, Christo, we wonder why he does these things. And Christo, what he does is completely gigantic. For example, you have this this project where he surrounds a whole island with a color. I don't know if you know these projects. He really surrounds the island with pink. You have another project which is this one where he creates this kind of barrier between the mountains.
But what is that?
Of course. Why is that? Of course, they have their poetic power. Yeah? This is Christo. What he does is he does this kind of gigantic installation, like installing a wall between these two mountains, or here he built a kind of wall that circulates all over the topography in a place in the States, in the West Coast. And you see that what he's doing is really like gigantic. You see, like this thing runs for I don't know how many kilometers, and you need cranes and the whole population to work on it. And it ends up like that, like a really gigantic gesture. You have other works where he wraps things. He wraps whole buildings. So at one point he wrapped Le Pont Neuf. He works with fabric, yeah. But I'm trying to say here he wrapped literally the cliffs next to the beach, the little bay in Australia, and he wraps the cliffs, and it gives you like quite mesmerizing effects like that, where you see this kind of gigantic work, and you can see that it's a work which is at the scale of the milieu. It's like me, I'm gonna do an action which is as big or modifies the whole milieu. And this is when you're doing things which are delirious, or which is in a kind of delirium of action, as Christo said. So why is he doing that? If you take the Reichstag, I don't know if it's here. Here it is. I think this is the Reichstag. He wraps the Reichstag. And why did he wrap the Reichstag? And here again, you have this kind of political background. It's because the German authorities, you know, the Reichstag was burned by the Nazis, and then the Nazis took power. The Reichstag is a parliamentary house of Germany, and until the fall of the Berlin Wall, it was still there, but it had this kind of contested past, which is that it was related to the Nazis. And what he did is that he wrapped it up, and it gave it a new life. And indeed, it worked. This time, it really worked. He was able to re-inject life in this collective monument. And okay, he created this kind of a huge object, which is a Reich. So I hope you understand this. This is when you really like take your action to become itself environmental, or to be itself what creates the milieu, or which is itself at the level of the milieu itself. So if you take a movie maker, which is Herzog, Herzog is a movie maker which shows you characters which are also megalomaniac. They do actions which are completely nuts. For example, in the movie Fitzgeraldo, you have Fitzgeraldo, and what does he want? He wants to build an opera in the middle of the jungle. Now, I hope you see why this is a kind of crazy thing to do, because why you want to build an opera house in the middle of the Amazonian jungle, and he wants, after he builds the opera house in the middle of the Amazonian jungle, he wants to bring Caruso, which was the most famous opera singer, to sing in his opera house in the jungle. Now, of course, to do that, you need a lot of money. And to earn the money, Fitzgeraldo is going to need to have a boat on the upper lake of the Amazonian River. And of course, no boat can go there because you can't transport a boat nor build a boat on the upper level, on the upper lake of the Amazonian River, because simply put, you can't get it there. And the hypnotic action that Fitzgeraldo is going to conceive is to cross the Amazonian mountain with the boat, meaning to transport the boat above the mountain. And this is what we call hypnotic action. I'll show you here how he pulled the boat off or on the mountain. And this actually, Herzog really did it. Herzog, when he wanted to shoot the movie, he didn't want to make a model or to make special effects. What he did is that he literally brought people and they transported a boat across the mountain. Now, why Herzog wanted that? And this is when you see this is how you understand that you're dealing with an action image. Why he did that? He did that because Herzog believed that the only way to be able to see all the accidents pertaining to such an endeavor is that you have to do it for real. Because if you fake it in a studio or if you do it with special effects, you'll never have the sounds and the cracks and the way things move, which are all accidental and hazardous. This is why he insisted on making it for real. And this gives you something like that. So they are really pulling the boat. Here they're building a kind of pulleys again. Here's it's not a scene, but the machine comes back. And you can see now that the machine is a kind of gigantic machine. It's like the machines of Elon Musk, who wants to go to Mars. It's like gigantic machine in SpaceX. And here they're building this kind of gigantic machine in the middle of the jungle, which is a kind of huge pulley system that is going to pull the boat up. Here you see the machine starting to work.
Ahead.
Put harder! Try it again!
There she goes.
the machines, the accidents, etc. I hope it's real. So this is, if you want, here's this kind of hypnotic actions that is going to bring the boat up. Now, the other side of that is, instead of these megalomaniacs, but it's also in a kind of delirium. You know, in Herzog, you have, as Deleuze says, movies about these megalomaniacs and movies about very little men. Men whose milieu is very, very restricted, almost restricted to a garden, like dwarfs or people who don't know how to speak or people who are deaf and blind. So you have all kinds of people whose milieu is very limited. And he shows you that these people whose milieu is very limited can yet access a kind of cosmic dimension because they are completely isolated and cut from the everyday flow of worries and entanglement in the everyday things. So they acquire a kind of sixth sense, which allows them from their enclosed milieu to get in contact with something which is really huge, like the universe. And one of these movies that deal with that is Kaspar Hauser. Kaspar Hauser is a movie about a man that was found in a cave, and he was raised by animals, and he didn't get in contact with human beings. It seems that this is a true story. And in the 19th century, they found him somewhere in Germany, and they bring him back to society, and they teach him, and he becomes this kind of character. And here you see this kind of relation between the very small, this man who is living just in a garden, of course he learned things, and how from this confined space he's able to get in contact with the universe. This is Kaspar Hauser after being educated by the man who adopted him.
Was denn? Erzähl du.
Ja, es hat mich geträumt.
Ich freue mich, dass du Fortschritte gemacht hast. Früher hast du immer geglaubt, alles sei Wirklichkeit, was du geträumt hast. Noch vor 2 Wochen hast du gesagt, du hättest die Frau Bürgermeister gesehen, wo sie erwiesenermaßen schon längst verreist war. Merkwürdig. Merkwürdig, dass du die ganzen Jahre im Gefängnis nichts geträumt hast.
Mich hat vom Kaukasus geträumt.
This is a connection to the dream and what he sees. See, it's a state of vision. I hope you see how he makes the motat. So now, of course, the action image is not limited to movies. We've seen already a couple of artists like Tingeli and Munari and those who deal with machines, but the actions and the doers, you can find them in many arts, be it activist arts or arts of actions. And this is what I'm going to explain to you, like the origin of action, right? Meaning what push us, or what is the context or the configuration, or the set of mind that configures an action. And here you have 3 positions. Now, of course, when you are in a milieu, you could react directly to what is available there. We've seen either by absorbing and acting, like Abraham Lincoln, the nationalistic way, or you can do it the democratic way, or the anarchic way, or the megalomaniac way. These are different forms of dealing with action, but one of the ways is to critically assess the situation. Now, what does it mean to critically assess the situation? It means that instead of impregnating yourself immediately of what is there, let's suppose you just dive head-on inside the Lebanese society and you just absorb all the different ways in which they speak, they think, they act, and you understand very well who is doing what, etc., etc. Instead of doing that like that spontaneously, this would be the nationalistic way. You could have a kind of distance. Like when you see things occurring in your milieu, you wonder if this is really what is going on. You don't take things at, as we say, at face value, meaning you need in a way to ask yourself the question, what is really going on in here? Let's suppose, they put a tax on the WhatsApp. You can either say, no, I don't want this tax, or you can say, yeah, but what is really going on in here? Or if you take COVID, some people say, yeah, it's very simple, there's a virus. Or you can ask in a kind of critical reflection, yeah, but who is this serving? Why is the state is taking such a drastic measure? And this is when you have a kind of critical reflection on that. So if you want, one of the authors in cinema who did this very well and a lot, he does it beautifully, is Kurosawa. And in Kurosawa, the characters are never just absorbing the milieu. Actually, only the naive character spontaneously absorbs the milieu, while the more experienced characters, they question the milieu. For example, in the movie Red Beard, you have a young doctor that goes into a mental hospital, and for him, it's very clear that the patients are not well treated, they are being they are bullied and severely punished by the master doctor. And for him, this is absolutely unacceptable, and he tries to oppose the master doctor until one day he hears one of these mad persons speaking, and he understands that actually what the master doctor was doing was much more profound than what he was objecting to, because he understood, the master doctor, that madness is something which goes beneath the appearances of violence, etc. And this is when he converts to the point of view of the master doctor. Now, of course, someone like Kurosawa, his problem is typically from a Japanese problem. And here again, it's another connection between politics and movies, because the Japanese main problem after the war was why we were defeated. Japan was a very powerful nation, and after the defeat of World War II, the generation of movie makers like Kurosawa, etc., they had to question, not only them, the whole society was asking, what are the givens in the milieu before the war that we didn't see? It seems that we were so sure of ourselves that things are like that, and we are right, and then we were defeated in a very, very nasty way, and now we need to question the givens of the milieu before just diving head-on on what is given to us as an obvious situation. So I hope you see here it's another connection where you see that the questioning attitude comes from this kind of situation where you have to ask yourself if there aren't things which are hidden inside your milieu, which are the real triggers and the real mechanisms which are making things work, while what you see as a given, as an accepted given by your society, is actually simply a kind of distorted image of these more profound givens. So if I show you something like that, now this is by Toscani, and he made billboards in Italy during the Fashion Week. So is this an action image, and what kind of action image is this? So I'll try Anna. Are you here? Anna?
Yes, I'm here.
So is this an action image? I gave you the story behind it. And what kind of action image is it?
I'm gonna say it's an action image, but I don't know what kind.
Thank you. But if I tell you the story, Toscani has put these on
Yeah, I know.
billboards in
During the
Italy.
Fashion Week.
So what is he doing? What is he doing?
He is fighting the whole fashion industry with those billboards.
Great. So he's having a duel with them, right? Fighting.
Yes.
Yes. Now, what is he showing? This is a model, by the way. It's really a model that used to walk in the Fashion Week. And what is he showing Toscani? What is beneath the beautiful models?
Health disorders?
Yeah, anorexia, meaning these models don't eat. So you have this kind of, she's almost about to die. She's as if she's out of a concentration camp. And actually, this is what's beneath the glamorous Fashion Week. So is his position critical? No worries. So is his position critical?
Yes.
Now, yes. Why? What is a critical position? It's a position where you show that beneath the appearances, there's another thing that is actually going on, which is the reality of, or the real behind the appearances. Is this clear? What is the reality of the Fashion Week? It's this, it's anorexia. Okay? So you as an artist, you can take the stance of criticizing, as you say, of opposing the established order, which is in this case the Fashion Week, by showing these billboards. And of course, the fact to use a billboard is very significant because this is how you act inside the milieu. You don't want to do it and hang it in your room. You want people to see it. You want to gather people to go against that. And this is when your art is active. So I'll show you another one, which is by Martha Rossler. During the Vietnam War, Martha Rossler shows that. So if we try Noor, now it's easy. Now, Noor, do you consider that this is a critical image, and is it an activist image, and what is it criticizing? And what are the two pieces, and the hidden and the not hidden, which comes together in the image? Noor? Noor, are you here? No. So let's try Abbad. Abbad, are you here? Abbad?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So is this a critical image?
Well, no. If you mean what it is criticizing.
Yeah. What is it criticizing? I thought this is during the war in Vietnam. This is the milieu.
Yeah. بيّن إنه it shows that the men are the soldiers fighting abroad and the women are at home attending to their home and waiting for their husbands. I'm not sure what
this
is criticizing.
Yeah, if
I'm
you
sorry,
are
sir, I was in the bathroom.
so yeah, who is speaking?
I was in the bathroom. I'm so sorry. I
No
heard
worries.
that you were requesting.
No worries. I'll ask you soon. So you see, you gave Abbad a kind of nationalistic reading of this image. Like actually everything is fine and the women are waiting. But don't you find that there's a kind of weird tension in this image? I'll show you another one. Maybe you'll deviate from your nationalistic. This is also by Martha Rossler during the Iraq War. What do you think of this?
Yeah, it's definitely criticizing probably American capitalism or its policy on war. We see Iraq in the background burning and the American woman taking selfies with it.
But there's a dead child or something in the background.
Who is speaking now?
Anna.
Anna, what are you saying?
Is that a dead child in the background? There's two
dead children in the background with the Iraq war. And you have people in the States taking selfies and as if nothing happens. But what really Martha Rossler is saying is that all this glamour in the States, be it in the 60s or in the 90s, is due to these wars that the States are doing. And what really is behind this glamour is actually dead children in Iraq and the war in Vietnam. And this is the hidden question. This is what's beneath the apparent word. This is when you have a critical stance. I think Kurosawa also has a kind of posture, which is a critical stance, where you need to go deep inside your milieu. You need to deepen it in order to know what is going on, in order to be able to criticize and to take a real action. So what is now the real action? It's not that you just support the soldiers in Vietnam. What you do now is that you go against, and you are in a duel with those who support the soldiers in Vietnam or the war in Iraq. And this is when you activist posture as an artist. And I hope you see that activism can be related to art, and you can have an activist art by using this kind of montages. The technique here is a montage. You bring these two distant realities to collide in one image, and this is how you give a presence to the concept of critique. Now you can see, and actually Martha Rossler, I hope you will listen to her interview on YouTube. She says she was an activist, and she used to distribute these pictures in the street to activists. And this is how you develop this kind of activist art. Now, if you take a post-critical position, is different. A post-critical position is, instead of saying that there's something wrong in our society, which is a kind of hidden question, they think that everything is fine, and those who say that there's something wrong are simply part of society, and actually they are doing the show like the woman taking selfies. They're not different from her. All these revolutionaries, activists, etc., they're simply people who like to make the show on their own and to show off, but by making the revolution. So there's no difference between being a revolutionary or being a conservative. And this is what the position of Meckseper shows. For example, Meckseper takes this kind of pictures during the riots. I think this is in Germany, but I'm not sure. So she takes this kind of picture where she shows you that the demonstration of the revolutionary is actually consuming a lot of goods while doing the revolution. Now, this one doesn't show it very well, but you have other images where you see cans of beers and McDonald's bags and all kinds of products of consumption which are being consumed by the revolutionaries while they're doing the revolution. So for Meckseper, revolution and counter-revolution are on the same kind of level. So there's no need, as long as she's concerned, to favor one on the other. And what she does also in this kind of defending the liberal side, she makes vitrines. And in these vitrines, she puts all kinds of things which pertain to the milieu, which is our society, or the society more, the modern society, where you have Playboy, you have perfume. And if you look carefully, you have also the book of Mao Zedong, which is a revolutionary. Sometimes you have also the picture of Che Guevara in the vitrine next to Dolce Gabbana, underwears. And Che Guevara and the Dolce Gabbana underwear are the same kind of thing because they're all, in a kind of doing the show. Okay, so I hope you see this is what you call the post-critical position. I hope it's clear. Now, the thing is, as we'll see soon in 2 sessions, the thing is that the action image, for you to understand, the action image was really like taken, or the heydays of the action image. The heydays of the action image was really during the before the Second World War, and it culminated in the Second World War, which is what you call the heydays of the great narrations, meaning nationalistic cinema, American cinema, French cinema, and these cinemas, even the German cinema of the Nazis and the British cinema, they were all sponsored by the state. And the cinema's role was to carry, in quote, a message, meaning to promote the milieu and the heroic action inside this milieu of the nation. And these were the great days of the action kind of image. Now, what happened is that after the Second World War, as I've said, as we will see in detail in 2 sessions, all of these great narratives, all of this conception of the milieu as something organic, something holding us all together, like you have in the American dream, in the French universalism, in the German spirit, etc. All of these, they were really conceived that we live in a milieu, meaning we live in a kind of environment where we are the center of the environment, and the environment is dedicated to us, and we all take part in the same environment. This notion of milieu environment collapsed. This notion collapsed, and after it collapsed, you had reactions to recreate the milieu. Like, we are losing what we used to be before 1950. You know, people are becoming just interested, as we say today, in money. The family is getting dissolved. The values of nationhood, of heroism, all of that is getting also dissolved. We'll see why in detail. So one of the artistic propositions that came in the 70s and after was, in the 60s, 70s and after, was to recreate a kind of milieu to resist the dissolution of the milieu. So you had stuff like, I'll just give you relational art with Tira Vanija Rirkirt, where in the museum what he does is that he cooks. This is all what he does. Why does he cook in the museum? Because for him, the role of the museum today is to recreate a milieu, to recreate an environment of conviviality, to reconnect people together, to recreate relations between the people, because of the collapse of the great societies, which were very organic and very related as they used to be before the Second World War. So you have other artists who do that. It's like Lucie Horta. Lucie Horta, she connects people together as a kind of happening. Yeah?
I need to go to work. I'm already late. I'm sorry, I need to
No worries. Okay. Send me an email to solve this issue, and as I told you, I'm fine if you can solve it a bit with the administration.
Yeah, already. حكيت مع my advisor. I think حتحكي معك soon.
Okay, great. So so you can go. No worries.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so this is, if you want, these are what you call reactions to this kind of dissolution of society, and they are portrayed in this kind of art. Now, another form of art which is much more confrontational and direct is people like Yes Men. I don't know if you know these. I'll just. So Yes Men, what they do is that they confront directly and in situation the opponent, which is, let's say, capitalism or something else, and this is what they do. So what Yes Men did is that after a chemical disaster which happened in India in 2004, the company which is Kaprow, you'll hear its name, it's a British company. The company, of course, refused to pay any compensation or anything to the victims. And what Yes Men did is that what they usually do is that they infiltrate the company. They send one of their men to work for the company for many years. And at one point, when the time is ready, what this guy does is that he is going to make a scandal by making declarations. So this is on, I think, BBC News. And the guy that is speaking to the TV host is a guy from the Yes Men, and he's saying things like, we are going to give a lot of compensation for the for the victims of the disaster.
Live from Paris now is Jude Finistera. He's a spokesman for Dow Chemicals, which took over Union Carbide. Good morning to you. A day of commemoration in Bhopal. Do you now accept responsibility for what happened?
Steve, yes. Today is a great day for all of us at Dow, and I think for millions of people around the world as well. It's 20 years since the disaster, and today I'm very, very happy to announce that for the first time, Dow is accepting full responsibility for the Bhopal catastrophe. We have a $12 billion plan to finally, at long last, fully compensate the victims, including the 120,000 who may need medical care for their entire lives, and to fully and swiftly remediate the Bhopal plant site. Now, when we acquired Union Carbide 3 years ago, we knew what we were getting, and it's worth $12 billion. $12 billion. We have resolved to liquidate Union Carbide, this nightmare for the world and this headache for Dow, and use the $12 billion to provide more than $500 per victim, which is all that they've seen, a maximum of just about $500 per victim. It is not plenty good for an Indian, as one of our spokespersons unfortunately said a couple of years ago. In fact, it pays for 1 year of medical care. We will adequately compensate the victims. Furthermore, we will perform a full and complete remediation of the Bhopal site, which, as you mentioned, has not been cleaned up. When Union Carbide abandoned the site 20 years ago, or 16 years ago, they left tons of toxic waste, which the site continues to be used as a playground by children. Water continues to be drunk from the groundwater underneath. It's a mess, Steve. And
it's a mess, certainly. Jude, that's good news that you have finally accepted.
Okay, so I hope you see what he did. So this guy is an infiltrator, who is the guy speaking to TV, and after this came out, live on television, the Dow company, which is a huge multinational that deals with chemicals, they had to say that this is not true, we're not compensating, and this is how you bring them into the open, and you ridicule them because they have now to say that they're not compensating anyone and they will not do anything. So you can think about something like that for the Beirut explosion. If you are an artist activist, you have to infiltrate, I don't know, the team of the presidential palace, and you make a declaration that we are going to compensate, etc. And the authorities will have to reply, and this is how you are able to bring them in the open. Now, this is another project by Laurette, which is part still of this kind of activist art where you are in a kind of dual in this situation. This is by Laurette. It's called Rembourser si vous n'êtes pas satisfait. And you see, this is Laurette, and you see his caddy filled with products. Actually, Laurette, from 1991 till 2001, he was able to eat for free in Paris by giving back the packages of what he was eating with the bill. So, you know, there's a law in France which is rembourser si vous n'êtes pas satisfait. If you're not happy, we'll pay you back. The condition to apply this law is that you have to provide your ticket, your bill, separately for each product. So what Laurette did, what he did is that each time he used to go to the supermarket, he used to fill in his caddy, and in the supermarket, he used to ask the cashier to give him a separate bill for each product. And after he had eaten the product, he used to send the package of the product with the bill to the company, and the company used to pay him back. And he did this over 10 years. And now here you see how this is a kind of dual and criticism of capitalist consumption, where, of course, you need to understand your milieu very well. You need to understand the laws. You need to know how to do these things. And this is how you're able to reply or create a riposte against this kind of milieu in which you are, and that you are criticizing in a kind of situation of direct duel. So just to conclude, I need to say a last thing on what you call a mold, a module, and a modulation. You see, we've said that in the action image, or when you live in a milieu, your environment is really what you absorb. And when you absorb your environment acts on you as a mold. Now, of course, you as an artist or a photographer, you can show how the milieu is molding you and how you're becoming, in a way, the product of your own milieu. You see, when you live in a place, a lot of time you start becoming like this place, and this is when you really absorb this milieu and you become like your milieu because it molded you. So this is a photographer. He's called Stephen Shore. And he makes photographs really where you feel the presence of the milieu. This is like, see stuff like that, which are very, very well-defined characters that belong to a well-defined time and society. This is by Stephen Shore. This is also by Stephen Shore, where you really see here the peculiarities of the milieu. Breakfast in an American kind of set, the motels, as you can see here, etc. So these are, you as an artist, you can show that. If you want a painter who showed that very well way before Stephen Shore is Courbet, Courbet's realism. Courbet realism shows you people in their milieu, and you see how the milieu is really imprinting itself on them. So if you take Courbet's The Burial at Ornans, you see the faces are very typical, and you see how the milieu of poverty, of hardship, is engraved on each one of these characters. And you have a lot of also cliché pictures like that, where you see, for example, an old man which is completely impressed by his milieu, like you see his face is completely tanned because he works in the fields, or you see a kind of Bedouin which has a very peculiar face because of that. This is when you see, as we say sometimes, the impact of life on you, or the impact of your living conditions on you, and you can capture faces like that. But of course, here the face is not anymore an affection face, because you're not trying to express something which is not present. You're just conveying like the impact of the real on you and how your face is absorbing this reality. So this is what you call a mold. A mold is when you have a milieu which is going to impress itself on you, and you become this kind of product of the milieu. Now, another attitude is what you call the module. The module is when you are going to create something, and this thing is going to generate a milieu. This is like what Le Corbusier and the Bauhaus used to do. They used to say, okay, we can have a module, like man is the measure of things, and we are going to create an environment which is at the measure of man by calculating everything to the proportions of man, and man by that becomes the module of the new environment in which we live. This is, if you want, was theorized by Le Corbusier in the Modulo. Another approach is the Bauhaus, where they think is that the module should be technological, so actually the size of the machines and what they can produce is what will set the measures of the world in which we live. For example, if you can only compress sheets of wood which are 1 meter and 20 large, it's clear that to make a table, well, it won't be bigger than 1 meter and 20 unless you glue different pieces of 1 meter and 20 together. But for economical reasons, we'll choose to make it of one piece. So this is why most of the time you have tables of 1 meter 20 or 60 if you want to have 2 little tables. Okay, I'm just giving you here this notion of module, and the module is going to generate an environment. The last one is what we call modulation. Modulation is when you have an interaction between you and your environment, or when the work shows an interaction between you and your environment. For example, if you take Moholy Nagy used to create what he called a light space modulator, And the light space modulator, the work of art, which is in this case a light sculpture, the work of art produced modulations of lights and shadow in space. This is how it is reflected on the walls. And of course, when you walk inside the room, you're part of this work because your shadow gets mixed with these shadows which are projected on the wall. And this is what you call a modulation. You interact with the installation or with the sculpture, and it creates this kind of environment in which you and the environment starts to speak to each other. So another guy who did like these cybernetic installations, as we call them, because you have this kind of loop between the environment and you, is the cybernetic tower by Nicolas Schoeffer in 1961. And this is a sculpture that reacts to the wind, and hence it is dynamically interacting with the forces surrounding it, and it also reacts to light. So at different times of the day, you will see it differently. And this is another form of modulation. The last one I'll show you is Kaprow, which used to make happenings. Kaprow is a descendant, or he puts himself in the legacy of Pollock. He wrote a text called The Legacy of Pollock, where actually he shows you that Pollock is an action painter. Why action for Kaprow? Because he used to integrate accidents and environmental scales in his artworks. What does it mean? As you know, Pollock used to place plastic things on the canvas before he splashes it with paint. And the way the paint splashes on these canvases the paint used to be deviated by these objects that Pollock used to put on the canvas. Besides that, for Kaprow, Pollock is an action painter because the canvas itself is bigger than you, and you get absorbed by it as if it's an environment. Add to that, says Kaprow, the paint itself is not anymore representational, but it is the thing itself, meaning the paint is just paint, it's a physical thing, and not, let's say, the blue of the sky. The blue in a Pollock painting is not the blue of anything, it's just a paint which is curved and takes shape as it is modulated by the force. So all of these make Kaprow say that Pollock is the action painter, is one of the first to show us that artists should create environments. And this is when he proposes his concept of happening, where artists indeed create environments by using real things, by waiting for the accident, by generating milieus in which you can have an accident, and by making works of art which are environmental, meaning in which you are immersed and not just you look at the work of art. This is called happening fluids. And the idea was to bring the neighbors to build a wall made of ice. And the accident would be that they would meet together, socialize, and maybe fall in love and stuff like that. And this is the idea behind this kind of happening. He made many other happenings where he used to really load a park or a street with all kinds of accidents, music, performances. And when you walk in this kind of milieu that he is creating, you are completely taken into it, and you see all kinds of encounters happening. And this is what he advocated for. If you want to summarize Kaprow, one of his intervention is that he filled gas stations with soap. And when you go there, you park your car and want to put gas, what happens is that you see bubbles of soap coming out of the gas thing, it's a gas gun, and it gives you a kind of accident, which is a nice poetic event, which happens in the everyday. So for Kaprow, the artist should create this kind of environments in which poetry and life, meaning the everyday and art, come to flirt with each other, come to a contact with each other, where life is going to provide its material to art, and art is going to enrich life with all kinds of unexpected events or happenings. Okay, so this is, if you want, the different postures on that. So just to conclude, what is really at stake in the action image? What is at stake is that in a milieu, we get saturated. So it's not anymore the oppression of the tradition, but it's really like when you live inside your milieu, as you know in Beirut, after a while you're fed up, you can't anymore, and you need something new to happen. You need to get out of Beirut to go to the mountains, or you need to go to the beach, or you need to travel. And these are strategies to, as Deleuze says, re-inject some air, some breathing inside the milieu. And I think this is really what is at stake in the action image, is to create something that is going to reactivate the milieu, to bring it out of its saturation by doing happenings, by doing critiques, by doing counter critiques, or by creating amusing machines that shows you that the accidental is always possible. Now, all of these things contribute to the vitality of the actual world, because the actual world, if you deprive it from the accidental, and this is why the machine is very present here, if everything becomes machinic, if everyone is just operating with a chronometer and like machines, if you do that, and if you foreclose the accidental, where your life will become very sad and very close, and you will become neurotic, as you have seen in Charlie Chaplin, or completely ideologized and brainwashed, as we see in the milieus, like when we saw Abraham Lincoln confronting the mob. The problem of the mob is that they're completely taken and blinded by their own milieu, meaning they absorb so much the milieu that they don't think anymore, as we say, and they become these violent forces inside the milieu. So I really think, if you want the vertical axe, this is what is at stake, and what you can do is make a presentation of these different political systems, or simply inject something new in the milieu. So a last word really is art brut. Art brut is a sub-branch of the delirious way of creating a milieu. So if you take someone like Dubuffet, why Dubuffet would be an action image delirious type? Because you see, Dubuffet creates an environment, but it's completely delirious, meaning it's completely out of his own kind of system. So as a Dubuffet creates milieus, places that envelops you, or he creates world figure, as if a figure had swallowed the whole world. And these are the two polarities of the art brut of Dubuffet. If I see it with someone else, you have Wolfie Adolf, that is going to codify the world with a personal code. So these are beautiful works by Wolfie Adolf. You see, how do you know that this is an action image? Because if you look carefully, maybe not this one, if you look carefully, you still have worldly elements. You have people, you have trains, you have music scores. And Wolfie Adolf is going to recodify the world with his own language, and this is what it creates. It creates this kind of another world, which is the world signed Wolfie Adolf. Now, if you take, I'll show you the whole pack. If you take here, these are sculptures by Shishani, if I remember well his name, and you see you have again these figures which are worlds. It's a world figure, or as if it's a figure that swallowed the world, which they are puffed like that, and they have a very, very defined facture. Now, this is another artist that creates these huge canvases by a compulsive act. You see, here the action is not anymore organic and well organized, but it's a compulsive act that's going to fill in the whole milieu. Now you have other like Aloise but I want to show you also the where is he? These all are output, but now you see this is by Roberts, where he filled his room with these drawings, and this is the figure he creates. Again, a figure world against milieu. And you have, of course, you have Sam Rodia, which is like le facteur cheval. Sam Rodia and facteur cheval, you see, they create a whole world out of debris. They pack them together via this kind of compulsive, repetitive action that generates the world. So you see, it's different from the module of Le Corbusier, where everything is proportioned and good. Here you have these kind of delirious creations, which are made of, first of a kind of singular decision, that of collecting one type of thing. And with this one type of thing, which is, I think here, barbed wires and steel stuff, he's able to generate a kind of a world of his own. So that's it for today. There's a bit more, but in general, this is one, the action image. Is it clear, the last survivor, Anna?
I'm gonna be very honest with you.
Yes, be honest.
You are a bit fast for me, so until
Yes.
I hear them again like 4 to 5 times, I don't understand anything, if you haven't noticed from my answers.
Okay, great. So it's very good. So if you're not understanding, it's perfect. At least you feel that there's something, you know. And I have to be fast because I need to cover the whole type in one semester, which is fine. They shrink the hours to 2 instead of 3. But these are technicalities. If you want to understand, we can find a way. You can re-listen to them, or as I've told you all, we can have QAs where I can re-explain to you and to the others each thing. Is that clear, at least for the logistic? Meaning we can have a Skype Teams meeting of the class hours where I can re-explain to you things that you don't understand. Do you have questions? Or at least when I'm explaining, you can ask questions. Or is it completely ununderstandable now that we are in honesty?
Hasab.
Okay, so example, today, what was not understandable?
You're very fast, Paris. You're like a machine. Sometimes I really think you're a robot.
I am a robot, that's fine, but we're not asking.
I know.
We're not arguing about that. For example, did you get at least the notion of a milieu? No.
Hala.
So it's So at least did you get something like you live in your actual world? Is this clear? You live in Beirut, right?
I live in Rabia.
No worries. You live in Rabia. You live in Lebanon. So
Yeah.
did you get this notion that you were educated, you absorbed stuff from your family, and this constituted the way you live in a space and time?
And it's my milieu.
Yeah. Is this clear?
Yes.
Is it clear that you can take an action inside this milieu, like be it a political action or a critical action against society or anything of that kind? Is this clear?
Yes.
If you see someone in your family oppressing your brother or your sister or your friend, can you react to that?
What do you mean?
Let's suppose, I don't know, your mom tells your sister she's not allowed to go out. Okay, is this a duel? Your mother against your sister, she wants to go out, she's telling her, no, you stay home.
I guess.
Classical scene. This is what you call a duel, you know, it's really not complicated. A duel is like when you confront someone inside this world in which we live, and given what we know about our milieus, like you shouldn't go out, you should study, you know, you should make money or not make money. These are what the milieu is asking you to do. Is this clear? No?
Yes.
We're speaking normal English, no? Okay. So in that context, let's take the yes men. Let's take the Beirut blast. Very simple, down to earth something. Beirut blast. Okay? Now, this is a huge event accident which destroyed almost the whole milieu. Now, no one reacted.
Yeah.
Can you force them to react?
Everyone reacted in their own way, no?
Yes, but no. Now, let's suppose for you the government didn't react. They were numb and they didn't care. And now you want, in a way,
Yeah,
to
the
provoke
government
them.
didn't.
Yeah, talking about the government. And you want to go into a duel with the government. One of the ways to do it is yes, men. I know it's very far-fetched, but I hope you just understand what is going on. What can you do? Well, you can infiltrate the governmental groups, and then you can make a false statement and make them react to it. All of this way of thinking art is an action way. Is it more clear now?
Yes, thanks, Faris.
You're not used to. Okay, we can stop if you
What?
want.
No,
We
it's
can.
fine because عن جد no, I think I said everything I had to say. So I think you know where I stand.
Okay, understood. Fine. So if you want to, I'm doing this QA just for you to feel free to ask questions when you want. And this way I can re-explain, or you can take a session after the course, or you can re-listen to them, and this is what we can do so far. Anyway, thank you for staying, and if you need anything, I think the logistics of this course are clear now. Okay?
Thanks.
Anytime.
Bye.